it's me, Lois, with OzzyLosi Knit Designs, and we are continuing to work on our Pretty on the Wrong Side scarf. And so this tutorial video is just going to show you how to add those picots up along the side following the instructions in the pattern. So let's switch to our hands. Okay, so just to show you what I'm talking about, if you're unsure, is we've got these picots spread out ever so often in the pattern. See, along the edge. Okay, so that's what we're trying to make. This is another one that I started. I'm knitting this one with 2 strands of sport weight yarn, and it's going very well. I like the way it's looking. It's got that marled texture, if we can look at that closer. So the main stitch pattern is made up of 4 rows, and if you wanted to have more picots, what you could do is just follow the 2 rows that add a picot every single row. So if you just follow those 2 over and over and over, you would have picots every single row all the way up. If you wanted less picots or no picots, you simply would just follow the instructions for the 2 rows that don't have picots and work your way up that way. Either way, it is going to be, if you're doing the spaced out like the pattern is called for, you'll be doing multiples of 4 rows. And if you're doing more picots or less, you just would still need to work in multiples of 2 rows to make sure that you can get the proper stitch count. Okay, so I'm at adding a picot section, so I need to cast on using the knit cast on method 3 stitches. Now we are not adding stitches to our total number of stitches or taking away. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we've cast on the 3. These are simply for that to be a picot. See, and so now I'm going to bind those 3 off. So I knit 1, knit 2, and I use the basic bind off method for this. So bind off 1, and that would be the 3rd stitch that I just knit. I'll pass number 2 stitch over, binding off that 3rd stitch. Then we need to knit again and bind off that 3rd stitch. Okay, so we have not decreased at all. It might feel like it, but that 4th stitch was already there, and when we bound off the 3rd stitch, it just put that in place. Okay, so now according to the pattern, we want to work a yarn over. So for me, what I like to do, the easiest way, is to bring my yarn forward, and then we're knitting 2 through the back loop. So I've brought my yarn forward, and then I'm just going to insert my knitting needle through both of those stitches through the back loop. Then I'll go ahead and wrap it as if to knit, pull it through, and now I've got my picot, my yarn over, and my knit 1. Okay, so you'll just continue in that yarn over, knit 2 together through the back loop all the way across. And when you get there, I'll show you how to make the picot on the other side. Okay? Okay, so I'm now at the end of the round 1, or the row 1, where I have added the picot on the front of my work. So I'm just going to be doing these last couple stitches. Do a yarn over, knit 2 together through the back loop, and then I just want to knit this last one through the back loop. And I'm going to turn my work, okay? And now I'm ready to go ahead and add a picot to the other side, and it's the same thing. We're just going to knit cast on 3 stitches, and then knit bind off 3 stitches. So I think it's really important. So if we want to just pause for a minute, sorry, here, hold on. If we want to pause for a moment and just look, this stitch here, before we start our knit cast on, this needs to stay stitch holder. Okay, so I'm placing that there just for us. I need this stitch. Okay, so I'm going to knit cast on. I'm going to knit cast on around that fake stitch holder. Okay, so I've cast on 1, and then we'll do 2 and 3. Okay. I want to get rid of these 3 stitches that I've just added, and then all the stitches on the other side of this fake stitch marker that I put in place, those ones I need to keep. So what I want to do is I want to bind off those 3. So I'm going to knit 1, knit 2, bind off 1, knit 3, bind off 2. And then there's the stitch marker. So I have to go beyond that to this, knit 4, bind off 3. Does that make sense? So then we've got the picot, and then from here, if you're working the pattern and you're on the wrong side and you are like, I don't remember what comes next, but I don't want to look at my pattern. Ever been there? Me too. So if we look at our knitting really closely, let me bring this up. So this one here is a purl stitch. This one's a yarn over, a purl stitch, a yarn over. So what all you need to do, so you don't have to keep looking back at your pattern, if you don't want to, is you want to purl the purls and knit the yarn overs. Okay, so we're going to purl that purl, and then we're gonna knit the yarn over. And that's just putting a purl on the yarn overs in the front of the work, and we just work that all the way across. So let's do this, and then we'll come back and we'll work the last 2 rows, sorry, not rounds, rows together, okay? So I just finished adding a picot to the wrong side on a row number 2, and I am finishing this row. So I'm just gonna purl, knit that yarn over, and then for the final stitch every time, you wanna knit that through the back loop, okay? And then I'll turn my work. And now I'm ready to work the rows that don't have a picot. And so I also just wanted to take a moment real quick because I'm a big believer in learning how to read your knitting. So let's do that, shall we? Okay, so we are not going to look at this picot down here because this one is the cast on. We want to look at the stitching between the picots that we have so far. So that way, if you get lost on where you're at, I'm not a big fan of using row counting stitch markers, but if you are, you stick with what you do. But I am a big supporter of reading your knitting. So let's look between these 2 picots. Between these 2 picots, I've got 1, let's see, it's hard to see, it's all blurry. Focus. Okay, here we go. So I've got this one, let me point with my knitting needle. I've got this one here, this stitch, and then I've got a second stitch. Okay, and then I've got a picot, and then I've got 1 stitch, 2 stitch, and then a picot. So this is what it looks like when I just finished a picot edge. And if I'm like, oh, should I be adding another picot here? Well, let's see. Let's see. I have 1 stitch. So no, I shouldn't. I shouldn't be adding another picot yet, unless I'm adding extras, right? So from here, what I want to do is I want to slip that first stitch. That's going to give me those 2. Put my yarn to the back, and then I'm going to knit my first stitch through the back loop. I'm going to yarn over and knit 2 through the back loop. And I'm just going to follow the pattern like that all the way across, okay? Okay, so I've just finished knitting all the way across that 3rd row of the pattern. And so I'm going to work a final yarn over and a final knit 2 together through the back loop. And then just like I talked about earlier with reading your knitting, when you get to this side, you can do the same thing where you say, well, is this a picot edge or isn't it? So let's look at our edge and read what it tells us. So again, we don't want to look at this picot here because that's part of the cast on edge. We want to look at this picot and this one to this one and this one to this one, okay, because that's going to show us what it's supposed to look like in between. Okay, so if we look here, we can see 1 stitch, 2, and then a picot. 1, 2, and then a picot. 1, 2, and a picot. And then I've got 1, and I'm working on 2, right? So no, this is not a picot edge unless you're adding extra picots. So to work the row 4, it's just the same as working row 3 where we slip that first stitch. Okay, so we're going to slip the first stitch, and then if we're reading our knitting again, let me just put that back on. Whenever you're working the wrong side, and I said this earlier, but whenever you're working the wrong side, you want to knit the yarn overs and purl the purls, okay? So when you can look at your pattern and keep track, but it's also really handy on the go or whatever to just be able to look at your knitting and read what it's telling you to do. So I'll slip that first stitch, and then I'm going to knit the yarn overs and purl the purls. And we'll just work that way all the way across. That is going to be row 4 of the pattern. And so if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to leave me a comment, send me an email, send me a DM, whatever, and I will answer those questions, okay? And if you liked this video, would you please hit like, share, and subscribe? Thanks so much. Bye-bye.